Hello, this is a late UN Day video. I made a UN Day video on UN Day, October 24th, but it was kind of bad, didn't edit it, didn't release it, so I decided to remake it, finally edit it, and hopefully you're watching the final version. Today I'll be talking about crucial UN reform. Many people talk about how the UN is useless and how it kind of sucks. It doesn't really serve much of a purpose. And that's kind of by design. It's mostly a humanitarian organization that also has a slight military wing that kind of does some stuff. It used to do a lot more stuff. Observe elections, observe borders, make sure no one's crossing the line, that type of stuff. And have a little meeting place where all the big boys of the world can talk and hopefully do some peace deals. But I don't think that's the best solution that the UN could go for, because the UN is meant to secure the human rights that they wrote out, that everyone agreed to, and to secure peace and secure humanitarian aid, and just make the world a better place in general. And I think there are better ways to do that. First up on the chopping block is a UN Parliamentary Assembly. Now, what is a UN Parliamentary Assembly? So, the UN Parliamentary Assembly, or UNPA, is a hypothetical organ of the UN. So right now there are two main organs of the UN. The General Assembly, aka the one you probably know of, where all the leaders go and talk and vote sometimes, all that stuff. And then you have the Security Council with 5 veto votes, aka the winners of the World War II, France, Britain, USSR, now Russia, China, and the US. They all have veto power in the Security Council, and a couple other nations. And the Security Council has a lot more power than the General Assembly. Basically, it does security stuff like peacekeeping missions, like sanctions, and other stuff. And now this is not unprecedented. There is an organization that's leading the movement for the UN Parliamentary Assembly. I'm just going to say UNPA, and that is the UNPA campaign created by Democracy Without Borders. Now this is also not unprecedented in government. In 1993, the Canadian Parliament suggested a UN Parliamentary Assembly. In 2005 and 2018, the EU Parliament called for a UN Parliamentary Assembly. And in 2007, the African Union Parliament, organ of that organization, also called for a UN Parliamentary Assembly. So this has been called for by major international and regional organizations. By the way, there were more calls. It wasn't just Canada, but that's the one I know. I just mentioned the ones that are really relevant. So the way I think this would be done is a democratically elected assembly. I know this is not very feasible. And I'm not saying it's going to be feasible. It can be elected in democratic countries, and then it can be kind of rigged in non-democratic countries. Hopefully more democratic, but they're sovereign nations, so we can't do much about it. And how I feel what the powers of this organization would have is basically I would abolish the Security Council, give all the powers to the UN Parliamentary Assembly, and also give the power over the budget, which is right now controlled by the General Assembly. And I feel like this is crucial for UN reform, since representatives from the people of the United Nations, which is the first line in the UN Charter, would know how to run the UN better and more sustainable, and would make the UN a better organization. Next up, we got peacekeeping reform. So first up, what I want for you, peacekeeping reform is a UN army. Because right now, the UN kind of borrows troops from other nations. A nation will join a peacekeeping mission and give them troops and say, hey, use these guys. They'll give them commanders and all this stuff. They'll give them vehicles, and then they'll use that for a peacekeeping mission. I think this is fine. I don't think this is that bad of a system, but I think it would be better if we had a dedicated United Nations army. aka a standing force from a bunch of countries. Either countries can dedicate divisions to it, can just or the UN can recruit on the ground to get troops. It would also have dedicated vehicles that they'd buy from contract companies or whatever. And this would make it so the UN could deploy a UN Army division at any time whenever a UN declaration for a peacekeeping mission is announced. So they don't have to go around to nations saying, hey, please, can you give me some troops? Now they can just, now that since they have their own army, they can just send them off. Another thing I would like to have is a more forceful peacekeeping mission. Peacekeeping right now is mostly kind of sitting at the border looking intimidating. Or looking at elections and kind of be like, hey, that's not democratic, and that's it. I want it to be more forceful. And this is not unprecedented, again. Back in the 90s, in the Congo, we went in there guns blazing, took out all the rebels, and went out. That was pretty forceful. We've done this before. This is not, same with Yugoslavia, with help from NATO, all this stuff. And I feel like we should do that more because it's effective. It's really effective. And here's some ways I think we can do that. 1, violations of peace are met with force. So if troops are just rolling through the border in a peace treaty zone, in a demilitarized zone, the UN can act. Automatic sanctions, no Security Council required for this. Automatic sanctions because you violated peace, and that's what the peacekeepers are there to do. And possibly clashes. I'm not sure about the clashes part, but any non-violent way to disperse them, like sabotaging equipment, all that type of stuff, to stop them from getting over the border is key. Because there's no peace to be kept there. You just have to try to make it so they don't go over the border and invade. That's basically it. Another thing I would like to have is a local UN peacekeeping autonomy command. So back in Rwanda, there was a UN peacekeeping mission around when the genocide happened, but they couldn't do anything. They weren't allowed to because the UN upper command didn't classify it as a genocide. That's the reason why they didn't intervene. There were troops on the ground ready to do something, but they just weren't deployed because the international community didn't want to, even though it was a genocide. And if they did say it was a genocide, they would have to intervene. That's why they didn't do it. So, in my proposed UN reform, the local UN commands around there, if they're not actively doing a peacekeeping mission, they could send troops to the perceived genocide, threat to peace, anything like that, instability, and crush it. And then in 6 months, the UN higher echelon can say, hey, don't do that, or hey, I'll send some troops to help you with that. It won't fix problems, but it will take action, and it'll show the UN's doing something, and we want more UN support. Another reform I would like to see is no more self-defense as the only way to attack. I feel like you should be able to attack regional threats to peace. AKA, what I'm proposing is that UN peacekeepers should see any attack on the civilian population as an attack against them, because that's who they represent, we the people. And to wrap it up, I do think UN peacekeeping missions are usually fine. I feel like we're spending so much money on missions that don't do much. We're sending like 50 people to a war zone and to just kind of sit there and do nothing. They're like a news agency. That's not what I want the UN to be, a news agency. Ugh. So I feel like my reforms would lead to some more peace, lead to some more stability. Next up on the chopping block is ICC reform, or International Criminal Court reform. So the UN has 2 courts. I forgot the name of the first one, but they kind of settle actual national disputes. Like if 2 countries have a border dispute, this court will hold a trial and decide which person gets that side of the border. Now, the ICC, International Criminal Court, deals with war criminals, individuals. Got the poster right there. So how the ICC works is that it has member states. Not every member of the UN is a member of the ICC. Canada is a member of the ICC, which means that anyone that the ICC wants for captivity or as a warrant on, that the ICC members say, yes, we will take that guy and we'll give it to you and he will be prosecuted. But the problem is this doesn't happen. Putin, who is ICC wanted, has gone to multiple members of the ICC. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. What? So to prevent pesky little members from preventing justice, we will make it so ICC has more independence. AKA, let's say they have 500 personnel, some vehicles, to deal with it, so they can go in there, hopefully work with local law enforcement, take this guy into captivity, and then send him to the trial house to be trialed. Another thing I want the ICC to do is more tribunals, aka more mass sentencing of war criminals in certain areas. We did this for Yugoslavia and famously for Nuremberg, but that wasn't from the UN because the UN didn't exist yet. And another thing I want to do is harsher sentencing for war criminals. In the Yugoslav trials, what I was just talking about, war criminals got sentenced to like 12 years, and half their sentence was taken off if they showed remorse. What? One murder gets you 25 years to life, but 1,000 gets you 10? 7 years with good behavior? What? Doesn't make much sense. That's not very good. That's not very smart. So, in my new tribunals, there will be harsher sentencing, and they will be sent to maximum security prisons, not hotels, which this is. This is where war criminals were sent. Anyways, I just want Nuremberg again. And last up, speaking of peacekeeping, here are some proposed peacekeeping missions that I think we should declare. So right now, here's a list of all the peacekeeping missions we are currently doing. And here's some ones I want to be implemented. First of all, I think we should intensify the mission in the Congo. The Congo is in a severe civil war in its eastern part of its country, where local militias are sucking resources from the mineral rich eastern Congo, while Rwandan-backed rebel groups, or just mainly one rebel group, M23, is either a Hutu or Tutsi majority militia group who wants to take over the Congo, basically. Their goal is to march to the capital of the Congo, 10 million miles away, and then overthrow the government. That's their goal. And Rwanda is actively sending troops and sending aid to M23. And so here's what I want to do to combat that. First of all, more active fighting against militias to give control to the central government. Second, sanctions on all rebel groups, including Rwanda, because they're actively, basically invading the Congo. So sanctions on all Rwandan government agencies and government officials, just like we did in the 90s. Next up, Haiti. So we used to have a UN peacekeeping mission in Haiti, but then we're like, okay, job's well done. Boop, do, let's go. And then not immediately, but soon after, Haiti broke into basically a civil war. Not actually a civil war, but like extreme gang warfare. Like more than Mexico. The UN peacekeeping before was led by Brazil, had RCMP as its policing organization, and humanitarian aid from Canada and the US. Here's how I would do it. I would make it a joint cooperation between the Pan American Union, or Organization of American States, and the UN. Because the Organization of American States has done peacekeeping missions before in the Dominican Republic, the neighboring countries to Haiti, also known as the Inter-American Peace Force. So they had their fair share of peacekeeping. So I feel like they should do a new peacekeeping force along with the UN to restore stability in Haiti, to bolster its image on the world stage as a powerful organization, and also stabilize one of their member states. And the goal of this mission would be take out rebel leaders and take out rebels in general and install a democratic, uncorrupt government so this doesn't happen again. Next up, I have a series of peacekeeping missions in the Levant, aka Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. So as you know, Syria just became a democracy. Since they're not fully unified, there's still instability with local regional groups. They held elections, but weren't really elections. Their hardcore electoral colleges were like only assigned people from the government could vote, so it wasn't really an election. But they're saying they'll do it later. They'll do direct elections later. So here's what I propose. I think a UN peacekeeping mission should stabilize the region, make sure there's no potential for uprisings, no Israeli invasions, no stop the Israeli strikes, stabilize the region, pour in economic development, maybe an IMC fund, who knows, and then after a while observe elections to make sure they're actually democratic, so we can actually get a democratic Syria, hopefully. Next up, we got Israel-Palestine. So here's how I would do it. I would say, since the negotiations seem to be breaking down, I would say two things. Actually, no. I would say a UN peacekeeping mission should basically attack from on the shore of Gaza, make it so Hamas is fighting a two-way war, make it so, and then either crush them completely or make a peace deal since they're fighting a two-way war, and make it so basically they just disintegrate Hamas, and then the Palestinian Authority takes over, and then the UN will flow in a bunch of aid, which they would have already been doing, and then secure the border of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank too, so Israel doesn't invade, and then terror groups backed by, and so terror groups in Palestine don't just launch rockets again. And then last member of the Levant team is Lebanon. What I would want to do is funding from the IMC, make it so their inflation, like worst inflation in the world, goes down, and to crush Hezbollah so Lebanon actually controls all of its territory, and take Hezbollah out of the government, and broker a peace deal between Israel and Lebanon, and secure the border, and also aid. And that's it for the Levant. And last three, but not least, the Sahel. There used to be a peacekeeping mission in Mali, because Mali has like a bunch of Al-Qaeda affiliate organizations in the north actively controlling territory, like ISIS did in Syria and Iraq. But they were kicked out by the new Mali regime after a coup happened. Kicked them out because they said they weren't doing anything. So go in 2023. What I'm proposing is another UN mission. Go back and actually finish the job, because back in, I forgot the date, it'll be up there, but France, when they were actually in the region, when there were a bunch of terrorists in the north, they swiftly got rid of them in like 2 days. Went up north, got rid of everyone, and then boom, stabilize the region. That's what I think we should do for the UN. We'll have more troops, and will send in more aid and will help the government. I don't really like the government, but whatever. And lastly of all, the UN should negotiate a peace deal in Ukraine and then send peacekeepers to secure the border. Thank you for watching this, whoever you are. I'm glad I actually made this video. Hopefully I'm edited it by now.